Elaine Porter never imagined she'd be single at 68. She had married at 24, raised three children, and spent decades in a house full of noise, schedules, and expectations. Her husband, Rick, had passed away when she was 59, and the grief was like a wave, sudden, hard, all consuming. But eventually, the wave retreated, and in its place was something else: quiet, space, solitude. For a time, people asked if she'd date again. Her children hinted gently. Friends offered setups. Even her neighbor across the street, recently divorced and fond of long stares over the hedges, made a few awkward attempts. But something in her resisted. She didn't feel lonely exactly. In fact, the longer she stayed single, the more she noticed something strange happening. It wasn't loneliness that filled her days. It was transformation. Subtle, unexpected shifts in how she thought, what she felt, and who she was becoming. She began to journal again, something she hadn't done since her 20s. And as she flipped through those pages, she realized that staying single in her 60s wasn't an accident or a phase. It was reshaping her. Here were the 5 surprising ways it was changing her, and maybe saving her. 1. She was no longer afraid of her own company. Elaine used to dread silence. In the early months after Rick passed, she filled every room with noise: TV, music, even an old radio she dug out from the garage. Empty rooms felt like echoes of what she had lost. But over time, the quiet became less hostile. Then, oddly, it became comforting. She started taking long walks without headphones, sat through entire meals without checking her phone. She began talking to herself, not out of madness, but because her inner voice had finally found room to speak. She'd sit on her porch with a book and watch the wind move the trees, and for the first time in her adult life, she didn't feel the need to be around someone to feel complete. Solitude wasn't a punishment. It was a place she could come home to. 2. Her identity wasn't tied to anyone else anymore. When Elaine was a wife, she was part of a unit. When she was a mother, she was tethered to her children's needs. When she worked part-time at the school library, she was Mrs. Porter to every student. Every label, every role had belonged to someone else. But now, there was only her. And though at first that felt like drifting, it gradually felt like freedom. She began wearing colors she never wore before: mustard yellow, plum, even bold reds. She cut her hair shorter than Rick ever liked. She painted her bedroom seafoam green just because she wanted to. No one had to approve. No one had to agree. For the first time, every decision was hers, and hers alone. 3. Her friendships grew deeper and more intentional. Elaine had always been social, but much of her social life used to revolve around couples, dinners with other married friends, group vacations, holiday events. After Rick's death, those invitations slowly faded. She felt the gap at first as rejection, but in truth, it opened the door to something better. She began forming connections with women who were walking similar paths: widows, divorced women, longtime singles. Their conversations weren't shallow. They spoke about aging, regrets, loneliness, sex, purpose, and freedom with honesty that took Elaine's breath away. There was no performance, no pretending. These women weren't comparing resumes or social status. They were seeking truth, and in their company, Elaine felt more seen than she had in years. 4. She became bolder about what she wanted and what she didn't. In her marriage, Elaine had learned to negotiate, to compromise, to swallow her desires when they didn't match Rick's. That's what she thought love required. But now, with no one else to balance, she started asking a new question each day. What do I actually want? Some answers were small, like not cooking dinner at all, or watching old French films late into the night. Others were bigger. She took a ceramics class. She declined a family trip she didn't feel like taking. She told a man at a cafe, kindly, that she wasn't interested in grabbing a coffee sometime. Not because she was closed off, but because she didn't feel obligated to say yes anymore. Single life after 60 gave her permission to set her own rules. 5. She realized she was still becoming. The world often told women like Elaine that their growing years were behind them, that their purpose had been fulfilled, that life after 60 was for coasting, not evolving. But the longer she stayed single, the more she realized she was still changing, not fading, but expanding. She started writing poems again, ones she didn't show anyone. She learned how to use editing software on her laptop just to make short films of her garden blooming each spring. She wasn't just getting by, she was becoming, day by day. quietly, fully. One morning, while having coffee alone by the kitchen window, she looked at her reflection and whispered, "You're still becoming." And she believed it. Elaine knew that one day she might want to share her life again. She wasn't closed off to the possibility of love, but she also understood something most people never get the chance to learn, that being single, especially after 60, isn't a waiting room. It's not a half life. It's not a temporary pause. It's a path of its own, one that transforms you in ways no relationship ever could. And so when people asked if she was seeing anyone, she smiled and said, "No, no, I'm seeing myself." And that was more than enough.